Hey, welcome to the Way Wednesdays virtual Midrash. I'm Doug. It's Gary. We're delighted to be with you guys. We are going through the Torah portion. What's a Midrash? You say it is where you go through the word and you're seeking the text. Darash means to seek the text. And so we're doing a Midrash and we're trying to understand what God said to us. That's the first part, comprehension. Then we want to apply it to our lives. We want to take these amazing, discoveries and say, okay, how do I live this out, right? That's the next part. So we always have to do that. And sometimes it takes a little bit of digging. Sometimes it takes a little bit of disagreement. It takes some prodding, some loud discussion, but we eventually get to really what God has for us, these amazing discoveries, and it's really a fun process. So we're glad that you guys can be with us. Well, what do you say, Gary? We are in an exciting passage. They're all good.
They are all good, but I tell you, this week's Torah portion is amazing. It covers probably the single most, apart from the resurrection of Yeshua, the revelation of God on Mount Sinai. It is absolutely God speaking directly to us. Mm-hmm. Wow. I don't know how much does it get any better than that.
I love it. Yeah, and you know what's really cool about this is it's like a preview of the second coming. I like your word revelation. The word revelation, you know what that is in Greek? Apocalypse, right? All right. Yeah. So apocalypsis is the unveiling of Jesus, right? So, but here we have God coming into this domain, right? He's opening up a little window in the dimension between heaven and earth, that veil, and we are getting to have a glimpse, just a little glimpse of him. But just like it says, when he comes back, the mountains are going to melt like wax. The elements are going to melt with fervent heat. I mean, all this incredible fiery, burning kind of imagery at this time of the second coming is what we see here at Mount Sinai. And that's really important because that gives us a case study that we can look at and we can say, okay, this actually happened. So the second coming is going to be similar to it in different ways.
Absolutely. And I think that's just to cut to the chase, right? That's the big takeaway tonight is this is like a rehearsal. This is a glimpse of exactly what the book of Revelation talks about. And as we begin to take a look at how the children of Israel, are called to this moment, it all culminates here, just as it will culminate at the end of the age. This is just a dress rehearsal, so to speak.
Absolutely. But, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. We have to start with Jethro.
It's right? Too exciting.
I know, it really is. But, the great thing about Jethro is here Moses was sitting all day long taking questions and trying to solve these different judgments. And Jethro's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Come on. You can't do this. He's like, well, the people come to me. I give them a message. I give them a judgment. Now you're going to burn yourself out. And really, we have Jethro to thank for a lot of our different system of government. A lot of it goes back to that. Certainly here in America, of our three different types. It's loosely, I'm not saying it's exactly, but it's loosely based on that idea of appointing different representatives for that government. And so let's get into it. We're in Exodus chapter 18. I can't see any reason not to just jump straight in. Let me make this a little bigger. I'll get rid of the foot or the references. All right. And Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, that the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back, with her two sons, of whom the name of one was Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. And the name of the other was Eliezer, for he said, the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness, where he was encamped at the mountain of God. Now he had said to Moses, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her two sons with her. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, bowed down and kissed him. And they asked each other about their well-being, and they went into the tent. And Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, for all the hardship that had come upon them on the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. Then Jethro rejoiced for all the good which the Lord had done for Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and who has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods, for in the very thing in which they have behaved proudly, he was above them. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and other sacrifices to offer to God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses, father-in-law, before God. And so it was the next day that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood before Moses from morning until evening. So when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did for the people, he said, What is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit and all the people stand before you, coming from morning until evening? And Moses said to his father-in-law, Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a difficulty, they come to me, and I judge between one and another. And I make the statutes of God I make known the statutes of God and his laws. So Moses' father-in-law said to him, The thing that you do is not good. Both you and these people who are with you will surely wear yourselves out. For this thing is too much for you. You are not able to perform it by yourself. Listen now to my voice. I will give you counsel, and God will be with you. Stand before God before the people, so that you may bring the difficulties to God. And you shall teach them the statutes and the laws, and show them the way in which they must walk and the work they must do. Moreover, you shall select from all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. And let them judge the people at all times. Then it will be that every great matter they shall bring to you, but every small matter they themselves shall judge. So it will be easier for you, for they will bear the burden with you. If you do this thing, and God so commands you, then you'll be able to endure, and all those people will also go to their place in peace. So Moses heeded the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. And Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. So they judged the people at all times. The hard cases they brought to Moses, but they judged every small case themselves. Then Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went his own way to his own land. Boy, there's great stuff in there, Gary. I mean, I don't know where to start. There's so much good stuff in here. I mean, first of all, I appreciate Moses' humility to take the criticism of his father-in-law. You know, you could be somebody who, or he could have been somebody who is kind of like, well, look at this great thing I'm doing. I'm so important, you know, and they're coming to me from morning to night. This is how important I am. And his father-in-law should be like, wow, you're so important, Moses, you know. But instead, his father's like, dude, what are you doing? This isn't good. This is going to burn you out, you and the people. And guess what? Moses is like, what are you talking about? I'm the most important dude here. He took that criticism. He accepted it. He received it. And I think for a leader, that can be one of the most difficult things. Is swallowing our pride. I mean, hey, I've been guilty, and this is where we just have to say, you know what? I'm just one dude. I can't do the whole thing by myself, and so we want to have a team of people. And I just want to give a shout out to people. If you want to help with the Way congregation, whether virtually, if you want to help online, if you want to help with our media, if you want to help with our YouTube experience, talk to us, okay? Because we need help. We cannot do it all alone. And it would really be great if we had more hands on deck, you know. So, I mean, that I appreciate about Moses, that he wasn't this arrogant dude, and he was able to accept that.
And of course, the scripture tells us that Moses was like the humblest guy. Oftentimes, as leaders, we get so caught up in what's going on in front of us that we can't see that there's actually a better solution out there. And so I really appreciate that Jethro comes and points out what what's going on. It's like, there's really a better way of doing this. And there is so much value in delegating responsibility to other people. It helps them learn. It builds them up. It gives them confidence. And so there's just really valuable lessons to be learned in delegating responsibility and not hanging on to that stuff. And my guess is that Moses was actually really grateful. And Moses was actually able to make it through 40 years. I don't see how he could have made it through 40 years. But by bearing this burden, it really would. It would be a massive, a massive case of burnout. But the other thing that I really respect is that Jethro is not a Jew, right? He's not a Hebrew. He comes alongside, and there is such value in relationships that span across the divide. We see that today. It's like, should we really listen to Jews? Obviously they didn't see Yeshua, but I tell you, man, they have 3,000-4,000 years of wisdom of studying the Torah that we can benefit from, and likewise there are a growing number of Jews that are perfectly willing to listen to Christians, and Jews are coming to know Yeshua in such great numbers in the land and outside of the land of Israel. That by having this sense of self-respect and understanding we truly love one another as brothers, and like you said, Doug, is like dealing with our differences. Whether they're vocal, whether they're passionate, and they should be, and because we both feel strong. But let that not be a divider between us. Let us start with common ground, and then let us work towards an understanding. And it may be that we never reach that understanding, but that doesn't mean that we have to just diss one another, throw one another out. And we see that happening just within Christianity today. We see that we are letting divide us. Or I won't say, it's probably a better way of saying that. We're letting
differences divide us.
Our differences divide us.
And I think to your point, which I think is really a great one, here comes Jethro. What does he know about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right?
Exactly.
Did you have a burning bush experience, Jethro? No, you didn't, buddy. I am so much better. I have had this unique experience that you have not had. So who are you to school me on the ways of God, right? Like you just got nothing to say to me. I've got the special relationship. And I think we see that a lot with, if somebody doesn't believe exactly the way I do, if they don't have the same statement of faith as I do, if you haven't had the same born again kind of experience as my statement of faith dictates that you must have, then you're illegitimate. And, there may be a line somewhere where you're just like, you're not in at all. But think about the centurion. Remember the centurion? And he says, hey, my servant's sick, right? And Jesus says, oh, okay, I'll come to your house and heal him. Oh, no, you don't need to. That's no worry. You don't. Just say the word and I know it'll be done. And Jesus is like, whoa, what are you talking about? Like, no, I've never seen this kind of faith even in Israel. And yet here, a non-Jew, somebody who is outside, who's presumably, well, I don't know if he's pagan or not, but, he wasn't exactly following the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as best we know. And he got it. He really got it. And I think sometimes, we're like, no, you can't come play with us, right? This is kind of what the disciples were doing. Hey, Jesus, here's some people that, aren't really, they're not in our inner circle. Should we go rebuke them? No. Hey, if they're not against us, they're for us. And I think we can become so, what's the word? Territorial over God, right? We've got God in our little box, and he can't play outside of these boxes, these fences. I'm sorry. If you want to play with God, you got to come to me, and I, decide on God's schedule and what God can do. God's like, I'm a lot bigger than that. I am the God of the whole earth. And there might be some things that I just don't know, right, about God. There may be some things that, heaven forbid, the Catholic knows that I don't know, right? I mean, you start thinking of all these other groups that might know something about God that we don't know. Maybe we'll just listen. We don't have to accept everything, but if we listen, take a few moments, we'll discover a few things, so, yeah.
And like we started out, these chapters that we're reading tonight are really a forecast of what's to come in the end of time, and we really will see a necessity for non-Jews and Jews to work together. When we come to the 144,000, these are 144,000 Jewish evangelists, and if we don't know how to work together, right, it's going to be really messy in the last days. So the more that we already become accustomed to being able to extend a hand, to listen before trying to be understood, I think that will benefit us.
Yeah, well said. Absolutely well said. Well, another thing about this chapter that I think is so cool is that we are getting to see really this amazing part. I mean, this is so cool, right? This is 2 chapters before God gives the 10 Commandments, right? And what is Moses doing? He's telling the people God's laws. Wait a second. How can he be giving God's laws? Wait, how can he give God's laws if God hasn't given them to them, right? So he says, look, and I make known the statutes of God and his laws, right? Again, how is he able to do this when God hasn't given them? Well, maybe that's the thing. Maybe God has given his laws, but he's not formally pronounced them like he's going to do at Mount Sinai in the hearing of all the people. But these laws have been passed down at least since the time of Abraham. We could argue, I think, from the time of Adam and Eve, but at least from the time of Abraham. How do I know that with such zeal? Well, I just have to go back. I'm in the wrong chapter. Okay, 26 verse 5. There we go. So look, Abraham obeyed my voice, kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Torotai. All right. So this is it. He already was doing this. And we don't see any place where God gave these to Abraham. It's that Abraham was already keeping them. So that would suggest that, he probably got them from Noah, and Noah got them from Adam. And Adam got them from, wait a second, drum roll, he got them from God, right? That's the thing that we see in this chapter, is that Moses is already dispensing the laws. It's not something new that they're going to get at Mount Sinai. And I think that's such a huge consideration for us to think about as we look at this chapter. Well, hey, let's get into chapter 19, because boy, there's exciting stuff in there. I get totally jazzed about this chapter. In the 3rd month, after the children of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on the same day, they came to the wilderness of Sinai, for they had departed from Rephidim, had come to the wilderness of Sinai, and camped in the wilderness. So Israel camped there before the mountain. And Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice, and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all the people, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel. So Moses came and called for the elders of the people, and laid before them all these words, which the Lord commanded him. Then all the people answered together and said, All that the Lord has spoken, we will do. So Moses brought back the words of the people to the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I come to you in the thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you and believe you forever. So Moses told the words of the people to the Lord. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes, and let them be ready for the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down upon Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. You shall set bounds for the people all around, saying, 'Take heed to yourselves that you do not go up to the mountain or touch its base. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. Not a hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or shot with an arrow. Whether man or beast, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds long, they shall come near the mountain.' So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. And he said to the people, 'Be ready for the third day. Do not come near your wives.' Then it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunderings and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain. And the sound of the trumpet was very loud, so that all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was completely in smoke, because the Lord descended upon it with fire. Its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked greatly. And when the blast of the trumpet sounded long and became louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him by voice. And the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain. And the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain. And Moses went up. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go down and warn the people, lest they break through to gaze at the Lord, and many of them perish. Also let the priests who come near the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the people break out against them." But Moses said to the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, "Set bounds around the mountain and consecrate it." Then the Lord said to him, "Away, get down, and then come up, you and Aaron with you. But do not let the priests and the people break through to come to the Lord, lest he break out against them." So Moses went down to the people and spoke to them. Wow. That has got some incredible drama in there. But I'll tell you, when I start looking at what we see, there's this phenomenal picture of God's power and the trumpet. I mean, that is like the second coming. This is in a sense it's not the first coming, but it's the first manifest display of God's glory on the earth in a huge way. We don't ever see anything like this before this time, right? I think probably the closest we come is when God shows up kind of as a hot stove or something like that, and he passes through the pieces with Abraham. But that's it. We don't have a big flashy display of God's glory, and this is it. And this is the first time he's going to do it again, and that's when he comes back. Wow.
It is amazing. And one of the things that I always like to take a look at, or the things that grab my attention as we read through passages, is when there's specific time frames that are mentioned, or specific dates. And this chapter starts out with, it was in the third month. And so that always, and I don't know why, it always piques my interest to say, oh, third month, okay. So what does that mean? What time of year is it? What's going on? What's being harvested? What's happening in the lives of believers and Jews at this time? And of course, the third month is when we observe and celebrate Shavuot. We commemorate the first fruits of the wheat harvest at this time of year, and it's commemorated with the tradition is that this was the time that the law was given. Well, it's derived from this very passage right here, and of course that rolls over to Acts chapter 1, and so all of a sudden we have some historical and context and a time frame that says, oh, this is what happened at Mount Sinai. This happened again, this appearance of God coming as tongues of fire in the temple in the time of the beginning of Acts. And what does it mean for the end of time? Because again, I believe, like you do, Doug, that these are forecasting or foretelling of what will happen at the end of time. We should be paying attention when we see the signs of the times that Yeshua spoke about, say, for example, in Matthew 24 and other places. When every time Shavuot rolls around, and we think we're in the tribulation period, it's like, oh, let's make sure our spidey senses is at full tilt, and what's going to be happening. I'm not saying that's when he's going to return, because I think it really is kind of going to be around the time of the fall feast, because we see this pattern already established with the Lord. But I think these things are so important. And the message, right, the one message of Shavuot is what's leading up to Shavuot. And it's so simple. As we read in Leviticus 23, it's really just the counting of the Omer, right? Shavuot really doesn't even have a specific date. It's not like, on the 14th month of Nisan, or on the first day of the month of Tishri, or on the 10th day of the month of Tishri, and things like that are associated with the other feasts and the festivals. Shavuot really doesn't have a date. It's like, okay, 50 days. You count 7 sevens, and then on the 50th day you shall bring this offering of the wheat harvest. And it's really interesting because it's an offering that's brought with leaven, the only offering that's ever brought with leaven. It's a whole nother discussion. But the whole message of Shavuot and the counting of the Omer, and I think the message that translates to the end times, is this is a time of preparation. From the day that the children of Israel left Egypt, they began preparing for this moment. Sometimes they prepared better than others, but this was all about preparation. These days we're living in are all about preparation. We have a mini preparation each and every week as we recite the prayers for Havdalah, and we studied the Havdalah prayer in our Hebrew lesson this week. And it talks about the separation of the Sabbath into the regular days of the week. Well, that's when that separation occurs, is when the preparation for the next Sabbath begins. Our lives as believers is constantly preparing for the coming of the Lord. He comes to us each week in a beautiful way, in the form of the Sabbath, as we prepare for that. But that's just a microcosm of what is going to be happening at the end times, and it's also a reflection of what's actually happening here.
I think that's wonderful that we're always preparing for the coming of the Lord, and I think that's a beautiful message. We really want to be ready. As we were going through this passage, it's one of these things I've kind of had my eye on for a couple of years now, and I finally saw that little snippet that I needed to see to kind of help me figure out where this is sitting. But it says, "You shall nobody shall come up. You shall set bounds for the people all around, saying, Take heed. You shall not go up. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. Not a hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or shot." Notice that "with an arrow" is in italics, meaning it's not in the text. "Whether man or beast, he shall not live." And then, so it's like you get the impression that somebody's going to kill them, but God's like, "Hey, get down, Moses. Set bounds." And Moses is like, "Well, God, you told us to set bounds, so nobody's going to come down." He says, "Get away. Then come up, you and Aaron. Do not let the priests and people break through to come up to the Lord, lest he break out against them." And it says that as far as, God coming to have fellowship with Moses, that he's going to be in this thick cloud. Okay. So there's something, it's almost like Moses is in a special suit, right? He has his special God suit, spacesuit on, so that he's not getting torched. But the average person should not come near the mountain because there's so much energy in that place that if he touches it, it says he's going to be stoned or shot. We're not told with what, but really the point is that God is the source of that. And I think we tend to think of shot with an arrow, as we saw there in the italicized words, that somehow people are going to carry this out. But I really believe that if they would touch the mountain, they would be stoned or shot from God's power, not from a human agency doing that. But that's just one of the many facets that we see in this passage. I mean, there's so much amazing stuff that, God's like, okay, tell the people how I bore him on eagle's wings, right? And if you'll do what I ask you to do, if you obey my voice and keep my covenant. Oh my goodness. Gary, this is a huge thing, this whole concept of covenant. If you'll do this, what will you be? You'll be my slaves because I'm going to give you my really hard law. No. If you will keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all the people, for all the earth is mine. You should be to me a kingdom of priests, a set apart, holy nation. Say this, right? God's like, God is proposing right here, right? This is what's happening. God is proposing to Israel. Will you be mine? Will you keep what I'm asking you to do? If you will, you'll be this special treasure to me, right? You'll be my schnookums. You'll be my little sweet honey, my honey bun, whatever term of endearment. I don't use those, by the way, but whatever terms of endearment you are using, that is what God's like, I'm going to call you that, baby. If you'll just keep my word. Gary's like laughing. What are you laughing at me for?
Well, I thought we were going to keep our little pet names to ourselves.
That's funny.
So, don't tell anybody you call me Schnookins.
Okay, I won't. But, so the whole point here is like, God's like, look, will you be mine? And Moses is the matchmaker. Do you see that? Moses is the matchmaker. God's like, hey, go tell her I like her, right? God's like, go tell her I like her. And Moses is like, okay. So he goes and says, he likes you, and he says that if you'll keep the covenant, the marriage covenant, you'll be his, right? You'll be his sugar plum, right? You'll be all of this stuff. They're just coming to me, man. They're just coming. You will be my number one, my special. And this is that relationship. It's not about law. That's what people get lost in. It's not about law, because the law was already given at least as early as Abraham, almost certainly with Noah, and I would argue with Adam, that God gave it way back then, so that it wasn't something brand new. So it wasn't like until this time people were just lawless, and then suddenly God's like, okay, I got these laws for you guys. You've really been messing up, so I'm going to give you my laws now. They already had the laws. Here they're gonna write them down. They're going to codify them and formalize the laws, yes. But the laws themselves are not new. And that's the point. And so what does Israel say, right? Moses brings down this message. Hey, God says he likes you. Do you want to be his? Hey, all that the Lord has said, we'll do, right? If God wants to get married to us, we're in, And so the other thing to understand here is that this is the so-called Old Covenant, right? This is that Old Covenant that we hear so much about, that people rail against, unfortunately. I'm going to go to Jeremiah 31:31. Let me see if I can spell this right. 31:31, right? So here, God is saying, the days are coming when I'll make a new covenant with the house of Israel, house of Judah, not according to the covenant, there's that word, that I made with their fathers on the day that I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant, which they broke, though I was a husband to them, says the Lord. Look at that, right? So what happened at Sinai? God was a husband. God was proposing. And this is where they enter into the betrothal. This is the betrothal period, right? And we who are in Christ, we talk about being the bride of Christ, which is accurate. It's true. It's just we tend to leave Israel out of this whole thing, but it definitely includes Israel. That's a whole nother story. But there's, that first marriage covenant was broken, not by God. God's like, my covenant that you broke, though I was a husband to you, right? I took you by the hand, led you out of Egypt, and you broke my covenant, though I was a husband to you. So I'm going to make a new covenant, right? This is the amazing thing. I mean, think about this. God loves her so much that after she had repeatedly broken that covenant with infidelity, even though they said, all the Lord has said we'll do, we'll be faithful, we'll be your people. Okay, right? They're betrothed. And during the betrothal, some 700 years later, God says to the northern kingdom, I'm done. You just keep spitting on me. I can't take it. Get out. Here's your certificate of divorce. You want somebody else? Go find somebody else. And as she's leaving, he's like, but I love you still. I can't stand you right now, but I'll work this out, and we'll have a new marriage covenant, so that all of the screw ups that you did in this covenant will be like they never happened. Because I'm just gonna wipe that covenant away. It's gonna cost me dearly, mark my words, but I'm willing to do it because I love you. I mean, that is such a beautiful picture. And so here we're in in Exodus 19, we're just getting to see this incredible display of power, just a tiny fraction of God's power, but it's here fully on display. But it's not about the power. It's not about the lightning and the thunder and the trumpet. It's about and Gary, what I just love so much is that when Jesus comes back, it's not about the display of power, is it? It's about his bride, right? That's why he's coming back. He does have to take care of business. He's got to take care of the Antichrist, etc. But that's just because they're standing in the way of his bride. And so he's going to deal with them with a similar display of power when he comes back, as we see here at Sinai. But the point is about the relationship. It's about the relationship. And I'll tell you what, you can study the gods around the world, little g gods around the world, and a lot of them are powerful and they're glorious. And they have all these attributes, but they don't love you. That's the difference. They don't love you. They're not willing to lay their life down for you. That's the huge distinction between this. You'll find other gods who are equally impressive in what they say the gods can do. They can't do anything, but what they say the gods can do, yeah, you'll find that, but not in the love factor. And that is that's just by itself what separates God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob from the other gods.
Well, you certainly hit the nail on the head in terms of defining this is not about necessarily the instruction or the Torah that is given. It's about the relationship, and the relationship is defined then by keeping the Torah. In this betrothal, in this marriage, in this wedding that is occurring here, they basically say, I do all that you say we will do. There's 2 points I wanted to bring out. One is that we see that the nation of Israel is addressed here first as a nation, the house of Jacob. Say to the house of Jacob. It's like as one people. It's like when we talk about say to the body of Messiah, say to the one new man. It's like this collective entity that is in unity. And as we are in these days, we need to strive to that unity. It is because God really addresses, yes, we have individual responsibility, but oftentimes we're so independent that we lose sight of what it means to have unity. God really desires that unity of his people. But the second thing that I wanted to bring up is the responsibility that comes with the covenant. And to be in a covenant, and if we relate it to a marriage, it means that I'm faithful to my wife, that I don't go and sleep around with other women. I don't go out looking at other things. But I think there's other aspects to what it means to be in covenant in marriage. For example, he says, if you do these things, I will establish my covenant with you, and you will be a special possession. My wife is a special possession to me, and you will be a kingdom of priests. As the head of the household, I am to be a priest of the household, and that's a covenant responsibility that God is placing on the children of Israel here in Exodus 16, and Peter talks about being a chosen race, a special possession, a kingdom of priests. That's also spoken of in the book of Revelation, spoken of other places, that there's a responsibility that priests have that is part of that covenant responsibility. And so fidelity is one aspect of it, but I think sometimes we don't really understand or live up to the responsibilities and the opportunities of being in covenant with God. We have the opportunity and the responsibility to be a light unto the nations, to teach. I mean, the priests in ancient Israel were the educators. They're the ones who taught the Torah, starting with Moses, and it disseminated from there. You see that from Jethro, right? And as a priest of the family, as we understand that we are to train our children up in the way they should go. We are the educators in our family. We each have that responsibility, and we see that propagated throughout the church, through the pastors and the ministry of the church and other people who serve, and in our individual Bible study groups and so on and so forth. We all have this covenant responsibility to teach one another, to hold each other accountable, to live according to the godly principles that he has laid out in his instructions, and of course to remain faithful to him, not to chase after idols and that kind of thing. But having a deep, and I don't pretend to understand the deep understanding of the covenant relationship that I have with God, but as something I continually strive to understand, because it is so important. It's the essence of our contract with one another as his partner.
Yeah, well said. I mean, that's just great. Let's move on to chapter 20. And there's more good stuff on the way here. And the Lord God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is under heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands to those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. Now all the people witnessed the thunderings, the lightning flashes, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood afar off. Then they said to Moses, you speak with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. And Moses said to the people, do not fear, for God has come to test you, and that his fear may be before you, so that you may not sin. So the people stood afar off, but Moses drew near the thick darkness where God was. Then the Lord said to Moses, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, you have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. You shall not make anything to be with me, gods of silver or gods of gold. You shall not make for yourselves. An altar of earth you shall make for me, and you shall sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I record my name, I will come to you, and I will bless you. And if you make me an altar of stone, you shall not build it of hewn stone. For if you use your tool on it, you have profaned it. Nor shall you go up by steps to my altar, that your nakedness may not be exposed upon it. Wow. It's so simple. And yet there's one word that keeps just resonating in my mind as I'm going through these. Love, right? Love. That is what these commandments are all about. What does it look like to love God? Well, to not have any other gods before him, hello, right? To not make graven images to other gods, thank you. If I love him, I'm not going to use his name in vain. I'm not going to use it in an empty way. I'm not going to slander his name. There's different ways we can look at that word, but to use it in a frivolous, flippant, empty sort of way, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to bring disgrace upon his name if I love him. If I love him, I'm going to keep the day that he said to keep, which is the Sabbath day, which is the seventh day. That's the day God said to keep holy. He didn't say keep Sunday holy. Again, I don't have any problem with people worshiping God on Sunday. That's fine. Do that, But he didn't say to keep the first day holy. He said to keep the Sabbath day holy. If we love him, then we should be striving to do these things. He said to honor our father and our mother. Now, I can't quite decide if that's loving God or loving my neighbor, but probably it's loving God because they're not exactly my neighbors, but they're people outside of me, right? And so how do I love them? Well, I honor them. Not because they're perfect, not because they're the best parents in the whole world, or they're the smartest, or the richest, or the coolest. No, because they gave birth to me. That's enough. That's enough. That's all is required that they deserve some honor, that they deserve honor from me. And he says that if you do this, there's a blessing that goes with it. Right? And then if I love my neighbor, what's the first thing I'm going to do if I love my neighbor? You know what? I'm not going to kill him. Right? That's the most basic form of love I can show my neighbor, is by not killing him. Right? I think we'd agree with that. Right? If you murder your neighbor, it's a good chance you don't like him.
You set the bar pretty low. I gotta say though.
Yeah. Well, but God did, right? He's like, look, the base here is just don't kill the guy. Okay. And then we start kind of graduating from there. If you love your neighbor like you claim to, or at least I'm hoping that you will, don't murder him. Thank you. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal his wife, man. If you love him, don't take his wife. Don't take his woman, his wife. You don't love him if you just took his woman. Don't steal his stuff, right? If you love him, don't take his stuff. It's pretty easy. if you love your neighbor, you're not going to say false things about him. And here's the one that we can hide so well. If I love my neighbor, I'm not going to covet, I'm not going to lust after his stuff, whether that's his house, whether that's his wife, which will get me in trouble with this one, right? You know, so, and if I'm coveting his house, that'll probably get me in trouble with this one. It could be this one as well, right? If I covet his wife, it's certainly this one, and it could lead to this one as well. And it could lead to this one, bearing false witness, if I'm coveting his wife. If I'm coveting his male servant, his female servant, his ox, or his donkey, or anything as my neighbor's, any one of these things is almost certainly going to come out because I want his stuff. Why does he have it? Why don't I have it? And so I'm going to find a way to undermine him, to chip away at his character, to kill him perhaps, to just outright steal it until I finally have it, right? And that's what Ahab did, right? He's like, oh, why does he get to have that really nice piece of property with that vineyard? You know, I want it. And then his wife's like, why are you crying? You're the king. Well, yeah, but he's got that really nice vineyard. Well, I'll work it out. You know, I'll frame him so that he's then killed and then you can have it, right? You're the king after all, right? That's how they did things over in other parts of Canaan, in Tyre and Phoenicia. But you're not supposed to do that under God's commandments. Why? Because you love your neighbor. That is the difference. And that's what the 10 Commandments are all about. Loving God and loving your neighbor, which is one word, love. They're all about love. Just beautiful stuff.
Amen, brother. That's very well said. And I think that really sums it up. I mean, God is a God of love. And oftentimes God is portrayed in the Hebrew scriptures as the God of vengeance, right? The God of war, the God who, just doesn't, he's not, and Jesus is the essence of God's love. When he is the same yesterday, today, and forever, his character does not change. And we're going to see Yeshua come back, and he's going to exercise a lot of the same vengeance that was exercised early on in the Hebrew Bible. So it just kind of depends on the age that you're living in, the understanding that you have. So,
Isn't that amazing?
It is perfectly said, though. Everything in the Ten Commandments is expressed as love for God, love for your neighbor, and defining your relationship. I love, you talked about the Shabbat. It's like God even institutes a date night for us, where we get to spend time with them. It's like every week, okay, I want you to make sure that you carve out time where we can spend time together. It's just beautiful.
I so agree with that. I mean, it is beautiful. And as we just dig in, so now what we've done is we've looked at the 10 Commandments. Now we're going to, of course, get some other commandments. But understand that each of these commandments is going to somehow find itself under those 10 Commandments, which are under the 2, which are under 1. So we go from love God, neighbor, and then what it looks like to love God, then what it looks like to love your neighbor. And so then there's some other smaller commandments or ordinances, you might say, as to how to break those down into daily living. So he says, now these are the judgments which you shall set before them. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he shall serve 6 years, and in the 7th he shall go out free and pay nothing. If he comes in by himself, he should go out by himself. If he comes in married, then with his wife his wife should go out with him. If his master has given him a wife, and she has borne him sons or daughters, then the wife and her children shall be her master's, but he shall go out by himself. But if the servant plainly says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, Then his master shall bring him to the judges. He shall also bring him to the door or to the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. All right, so I'm going to stop there because there's stuff I just want to get to before we go any further. But, I think people read this like, oh, slavery, it's such a bad thing. And I think slavery is a bad thing. I want to make that very, very, very clear. Slavery is a bad thing. But we have to understand that the African slavery that England and especially America participated in for several hundred years, where we went to Africa, we took them against their will, put them on boats, brought them back here, whipped them, treated them terribly, oppressed them, abused them, killed them at any time we wanted to, and we did not consider them human. Right? They were less than human. Right? That's the stark reality of American history. Right? So that is one kind of slavery. We'll call that African slavery. The Hebrew slavery is different. All right, and we have to understand here that back in the day, they did not have prison systems. They didn't have that. They did not have Social Security. They didn't have any of these different things. So first of all, even talking about having a Hebrew slave is almost like, uh-oh, we did something wrong. Because God said, if you will keep my ways, it's going to be awesome. But then he tells us here and other places that if you don't keep my ways, well, then these various plagues are going to come upon you. Tough times will come upon you. And, it'll be a bummer. Okay. So here is a man who sells himself into slavery because he doesn't have enough money. Or another thing is that if somebody had stolen and they did not have the money to repay with the fines, then they could be sold into slavery. Keep in mind that this slavery was 6 years, and then at the beginning of the 7th year, so after you've completed you're now on your 7th birthday, as it were, so at the beginning there of that 7th year, you now get to go free. Why? Because you've paid the obligation, you've paid the debt. This is not so much a punitive thing. I mean, it could be if you stole, but really it's a balancing of books. Okay, you've taken something, now you've got to give back something, right? Because now there's an imbalance and you have to pay that back. And so if you don't have the money, if you stole, if you don't have the money to pay back with the penalties, then you get to go be a slave. But guess what? You're not just sitting in a box wasting away for 10 years. You are getting to be a productive person. You're getting mentored by this master who has to treat you with respect. He cannot treat you like cattle. He's got to treat you with respect. And you can even get married at that time, right? So there's obviously a lot of benefits. And they did not have millions of people incarcerated in a tiny little cage, right? So this was a work mentor program, if you will. And I think it's so much better than what we have today, where somebody messes up. Sometimes, there's people that have smaller infractions. Obviously, they're capital type infractions, but here we're talking about smaller infractions, smaller crimes that require, something. And so instead of having this huge prison system, America has the largest prison system per capita than any other country in the world. It's really sad. And people go there, and guess what? Most of them are not getting reformed. They're going, it's obviously tough on the family. They come out, and a lot of times they're destitute. Sometimes they become institutionalized, and so they want to go back, or they're back on the streets. They're back doing what they know to do because they didn't gain any skills while they were in prison. Most of the time, okay, there's obviously some exceptions, but most of the time they did not gain adequate life skills to not find themselves in prison again. But this system that God has set up gives people a chance to, pay back society, as it were, to pay back this person and to change their lives. So that's the first thing.
No, I think you bring up a really good point, and I think it's really important to understand the distinction between slavery, as it's commonly known in the United States, as the distinction between that African slavery and the slavery that happened, the sense of being a slave in biblical times. So I really wholeheartedly agree with you there. And so as we look at what's the takeaway from that, because we're all in different socioeconomic situations, right? Some of us find ourselves indebted, enslaved. It may be to our job, it may be to
a credit card.
Different types of things. We find ourselves, we're just trapped, we're stuck, and others are more fortunate. And yet, how do we treat others that either serve us or make sure that we take care of our needs? The people that we hire to do things, how do we treat those people? How do we serve as if, regardless of how well off we are? Do we have a servant's heart? The basis of being a slave is to serve, right? To serve a master. We all serve a master. And oftentimes we have a double role of we have other people serving us, and how do we treat them? Do we treat them as we would want to be treated as one who provides that service? So I think there's some really great takeaways in terms of looking at both sides of this slave-master relationship, because through our life, and probably even multiple times a day, we switch those relationships around, depending on, are we at work, are we in our family, are we in a different setting, in a different in a community, in a different social setting, and things like that. And it's how we conduct ourselves, regardless of that circumstance, that really allows that light that we have to shine, that allows the Torah to be seen in us, to see Yeshua reflected in our lives. That's where it becomes important.
Amen. So the next part has to do with if you have a female slave. We're out of time, and I just want to let people know that I dealt with this yesterday on my Your Bible Questions Answered show, which is here on my YouTube channel. So go ahead and check that out. What I just want to say really briefly, though, about this particular passage is that it's not that a father could just sell his daughter. Like, I'm tired of my daughter. I think I'm just going to sell her. I'm going to get rid of her. She doesn't cook very well. She doesn't do the dishes. And
I was looking to make a few quick bucks, man. Come on, work with me here.
What will you give me for her? 100, 200? I mean, come on. That's not the point here. But it's flowing from what we saw in the previous section, that if a man becomes a slave, what are the guidelines for that? So here we have a woman, obviously a father is having to sell his daughter. That is not a fun thing to do. That means that the father has either gotten himself in trouble legally somehow, he should be sold, I don't know, or probably the more likely is that he's out of money. He doesn't have the money to pay for whatever. And, again, there was no Social Security, there was no food kitchen, right? So you had to do sometimes difficult things. And the girl was to be treated respectfully. She could become the master's wife, and if so, he had to treat her with the same rights and privileges as the other wives. If that were the case, he could buy her and then give her to his son. But guess what? This is now a husband-wife relationship, and so then all of the laws that govern a husband-wife relationship govern this new marriage, right? So it's not like it's just I'm going to buy you and abuse you and I don't care and you're mine, and doesn't work that way. That's not the way it was. But really, the bottom line here is that the father found himself in difficult financial straits. And so he was forced to do this. He didn't want to do this, but this is the situation. And again, what God is doing is he's providing a safety net so that if these things should happen because you as a country were not doing what you're supposed to do, or you as a community, or you as a man are not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you find yourself in difficult times, here's what's going to happen. This is how this kind of situation needs to happen. And when you just keep that in mind, that, God's not encouraging people to sell their daughters, not at all. It's just saying, if this happens, this is what needs to happen, right? So, yeah, go sell yourself, buddy. I mean,
there goes my retirement. Oh well.
Yeah. Well, we're out of time, brother. We did it, but
Hey, just before we sign off, I do want to let people know that because of the situation with coronavirus, we were forced to postpone our trip to Israel this April. But we have rescheduled it. We have postponed it. It is going to be rescheduled for the spring of 2022. So one of the key commandments or key concepts that was brought out in this Torah portion was that the Lord is going to bring you into this land. You have an opportunity to visit this land in March or early April of 2022. And people often kind of struggle with, well, how can I afford to do that, and things like that. And I say, if you have tax returns coming, I know this is a difficult time for people especially that are out of work and things like that, but if you can afford to put your stimulus check aside, put some of your tax return aside, plan to come with us to Israel. It is such a blessing, and it's part of this I will bring you into the land realization that there is a land that God has set aside that we want to come and visit. We want to become acquainted with. We want to go and walk where Yeshua walked and be part of that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. You'll be seeing more about that over the course of the next year. God willing that this pandemic gets behind us once and for all. This is the second time we've had to postpone this trip. So anyway, really thank you for considering that.
Yeah, well said. Also, guys, I do a show on Thursday nights, every other Thursday nights, called Prophecy Roundtable. I'm doing it tomorrow night. We're going to talk about what is the day of the Lord. Should be really exciting. And then, of course, on the Shabbat, we have the Through the Bible. Also, at 10:30, we share with you our worship and our time of liturgy. Hey, we're not exactly the fanciest band, but you know what? We're making a joyful noise to the Lord. And if you want to join us for that, it would be wonderful. So always a pleasure to be with you guys. God bless you. Take care.